time. You do you. You get do things right. Not so much.
I mean, I still see some positive comments, and I'm
Yeah.
always happy that.
But it's now starting to be negative comments are bubbling up a little bit more frequently.
Man.
Unfortunately.
The way I'm ending this is really, it's really bad.
Huh?
The way I'm ending this is really bad. Can you look at, so like, I'm just going to quickly go over like dynamic elements and say like, essentially this star just does this. And then I'm just going to quickly go over styles and that's pretty much it. And then I'm just going to like rant about Angular 2 on the slide.
Rant.
That's okay, right?
Well, it's up to you. What do you want to say, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Angular 2 has positives and negatives, just like anything else.
Yeah. All right, so how much did you see so far?
I feel like mentioning observables is a very important thing.
I was going to, probably just going to mention it during the event emitter.
Yeah, talk about it. Well, events, inputs and outputs. Yeah, talk about it there, I guess, because it's a pretty core part to Angular and why Angular 2 is so much more performant than Angular 1 and it's designed a lot better, right?
Well, it's one aspect to it, but like,
Right.
I don't want to lose like everyone, essentially.
Yeah, I guess observables deserves its own little talk too.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard.
Like, essentially, should I list off all the things I'm not covering? Like pipes, observables.
I mean, maybe you can list some more stuff that is worth knowing about Angular 2, sure. And maybe if you have the time to quickly patch it in, links to all like resources about them.
Oh man.
That might be tough. Yeah.
Not enough time. It's literally like 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And I haven't even like, I practiced this talk like partially, so it's mostly just going to be freestyling.
I usually just do one practice through and then keep in mind all the things I can improve on and then don't think about it.
Yeah.
But you should know, you know all these things pretty well.
Yeah. It's just audience.
You've been on Angular 2 probably deeper than most, I think, right? Because I've seen you talk on the Gitter all the time before. I stopped really frequently in Gitter.
I stopped going, Gitter was like so much spam.
It's also so slow.
Yeah, it's so slow that I was like,
That's the most frustrating part for me, right?
if it wasn't slow, if it was like Slack, then it's like, yeah, totally, this is like,
I'd be annoyed by it, but I would probably like pay attention.
you would deal with it more. Alright, well, I guess I can just go over this.
I mean, at this point, it's probably not worth fretting too much about it because, I mean, most of your presentation's done, right? And you don't want to forget about other important points that you're going to mention during the talk. Which is also why bullet points is helpful because it gives you a guideline for what helps jog the memory more. You don't just keep it all in your head.
I am so glad to see you in person because you actually have some white hair in there.
Oh yeah,
I've been
there's
so
a ton.
jealous all this time. You've got this mop of in there, and it reminds me. Actually, I had more hair than you. I used to be down there a year.
Oh wow.
I saw a picture of me a few years ago. Like, who the f is that? I'm serious. I was like, me? But you know what? I didn't have the Peter Frampton number. You know who he is? Peter Frampton comes alive. He had the big bushy blonde hair, like a pretty boy. All the girls were throwing panties at it. Now it's all gone. I'm like, yes, there's justice. Not that there's any jealousy, of course. No, we're all being mature here. I just wanted to ask you, if I may.
Go ahead.
So I just jumped into Angular 2 waiting because of all the changes.
Yep.
Saw some code, just had a burst of productivity this weekend. I looked at the HTTP example.
Yep.
It's not an Angular 2 /HTTP. It's moved. I can't find it. I see it in the directory and know it. It's there in the references. I can't get it. I can do jQuery, but
wait, Angular 2 HTTP?
yeah.
So you do Angular 2 /HTTP?
Yeah,
I did that. It does. I do TSC compiles. Can I run it? Not found.
Yeah, that's not found because you have the HTTP. You have to deconstruct it, and then you have to inject that in your component.
I did. I put it
But
in my constructor.
you also need to provide it.
I did. I did an import as you read from in the constructor public, HTTP colon capital.
But did you specify the HTTP underscore providers?
Oh, sorry, I heard you, but I didn't.
You have to provide everything from any other module.
Is that obvious that that's the case? And if so,
Well, it's similar to like Angular.modules. You know, remember how we used to attach everything to Angular.modules? So in Angular 2, you just have everything inside of an array, and that is the underscore providers.
is this obvious that that's the case? I mean, one could sort of divine that and go.
Well, I'm going to go over that,
excellent.
but not HTTP.
Okay.
I'm not going over HTTP or
too much.
yeah.
Is there a way to get information about that? Because if I look online and stuff, all those old samples, they're broken, they don't work.
Yeah, everything.
They have examples in the repository.
I did. I looked at those.
The
and that
repository
one's-
is the best one.
That one doesn't work because that's where I went. Oh, sorry. I went to the new web page. There's an example. One of the official places, it's got reference to the old stuff. Or rather, it doesn't have the provider in there. I'd like to see it.
The website is on a different repository, so I would recommend looking at the main Angular repository. There's the examples in there.
Okay, and there should be one there. That would be good if you could show that link and maybe kind of.
Yeah, there's another thing of.
I'm sure Rob also has a plug.
There's another thing of you could the HTTP underscore providers. Like you could essentially inject that at the application level, which is during Bootstrap.
Okay, so just do it at inject. Is that?
No. There's with the Bootstrap, you
you
provide
there.
you provide it there. Yeah.
Oh, he's looking.
See, it's simple enough, yet the details sort of elude so.
It just takes getting used to. That's really it. And there's not enough documentation.
Yeah.
You can spend
I can slip it in here.
The trivia. Where, I was asking this, where would you recommend as a follow-up?
Despite
I
the
could
music,
go
I can actually hear him.
to ask?
I mean, I personally have been just using the main Angular repositories that I like. Also, maybe taking a look at maybe some third parties like libraries that have been started up. Maybe you can take a look there as well.
Anything from November to December, January is a good chance. So yeah,
I mean, we've been keeping up to date with NG.
I don't know, I tried to
but we don't use HTTP obviously because it's built on top of UI, right? So it's a different type of library.
that's why I'm obsessing about it. By the way, I'm really happy about one thing. I can do just for stuff like that. Just put it in the template. If I can, it just works.
How's this?
Panel, do some D3 stuff with that.
How's that?
I'm gonna run it over.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I also want to see if you can click press present and see if it's actually syncing with mine.
Okay.
There's a lot of
I would not advise touching animation stuff.
I know.
Yet, though.
NGN, Animate 2.
Whatever
TS
the
is working on it, I think.
yeah.
And it's not ready, I think, or red or something, but TS is a great guy.
Yep.
He hasn't said much about it since his talk last year.
Yeah.
He's
So I
been
saw-
jumping around between projects.
I saw the code sample on Stack Overflow and it said don't bother, wait until they had the link. And I tried it, it still works.
Yep.
So see, I'm more into SVG because
Oh,
it's
there's
separate, right? That is
Yeah.
a lot of micro minutia.
they had some problems with SVG. I don't know if they fixed it or not.
Sorry?
They had some problems with SVG.
Oh, it works.
Yeah.
I did it.
Okay.
I did in the template. I put the SVG element.
Well, SVG is hard. I posted
Actually-
the issue before in the Angular repo.
Yeah.
They needed to put SVG compatibility because I knew that they probably didn't account for a lot.
6 months ago, I posted something on Stack Overflow for doing an Angular 2, and then I left it and just tried it in the weekend this weekend. So, FYI.
Well, the thing is, it's stuff like binding to all those like specific attributes, and Angular has to distinguish between the SVG camel case
Correct.
attributes from the
That I have
regular.
not done yet. I just did the emails. And I was like, okay, I can rest now.
But I mean, like attributes such as view box, if you want like custom
Correct.
binding.
Or also when you use hyphenated, like stop color, or was it if you use stop uppercase? This is in React, actually. You had to use camel case, you can't use dashes, hyphens. But now React has full support for all of this.
how's it going?
So you got some competition.
Nope.
And D3.
But
And
yellow red.
Hello, my friend.
Hey, nice
How
to
are
meet
you
you.
doing? Yeah.
Good. Good. I have to set this up.
Yeah.
All set?
Maximum warm.
Trying to.
And it's one of those things where I
Best of luck.
Where are you going to do more workshops?
It's one of those. Anyway,
Probably next month.
Okay.
a lot around.
Because I was thinking about, I told you about our tech lead is trying to pick a framework to reflect our code to, because we're using our own framework. He was trying to decide between React or Angular 2. And I volunteered. I said, I'll just make the photo mirror into Angular 2, and if you like it, then we can refactor everything into Angular 2.
I'll help you with that.
Okay. And I also told him about AngularClass, but he doesn't. He said he doesn't like to. He doesn't want to hire outside people.
Some people do that.
Yeah, he just said, you want to learn something, just learn on your own. We don't need to hire. So I tried.
Thanks. But like, I could just teach you, and then because like the more people use Angular, the better.
Promotion.
Yeah.
Okay.
So no problem there.
Are you going to do a workshop on weekends again?
Sorry, just say hi. How are you? Sorry, just say hello.
I'll leave you to talk to. I'll message you.
Yep.
Yeah. I'll leave you to talk to.
Okay.
All right.
Actually, Redux is basically agnostic. It's not technically to React. It's kind of a generic system. And so that's why it works. It's not that difficult to do. But it's a positional thing, strategy, perception. It's like, Angular's like, oh, you guys are doing relay and graph. Right? So you're not losing the competitive. Because there are people saying that relay and GraphQL I know it's hard. But for people who don't know, think of the election right now. Think of all the hype that's going on. In a small way, there's a little bit of that.
It's solving different problems.
Understood, but when people don't know what those problems are, the difference is they're, oh shit, you know, Trump says something,
I just don't care when people just like get.
I know, what I'm not saying is managing expectations and perception is an unavoidable and inevitable part to some of it. I'm not saying you're going to be a full-time politician, but you are trying to get market share, and mind share / market share. So it kind of, just my opinion, luckily with fear, I could just do stuff and go, whatever. Anyway, I'm looking forward. Will there be code samples and links and all that stuff? Hopefully, maybe, sort of. If you feel so inclined. Would beer make you more inclined?
I could provide
Is it
some
only
links.
beer over there?
I think, for now, there might be some wine. I don't know.
I'm not in the alcohol.
You know what? I'm Italian. I actually, when I was 12 years old, I had an uncle tell me, I'm not sure, Italian, from the old country, he said, drinking wine is as natural as breathing air. And I grew up thinking, like, yeah, and then as an adult, wait a minute, there's like billions of people who actually don't believe that.
The last time I drank wine,
Did you get messed up? That's
I
good.
just say I
Stop.
smoked the worst in 6 years.
What?
I smoked the worst in 6 years.
That's good. You stop drinking. Remember, it's a toxin, right? So just like the 4 ounces of therapeutic medicine, serotonin,
Me and a friend we came upon unlimited wine tasting.
Well, hey, say no more. All you gotta say is unlimited. Hey, where's my coffee? I get it. So yeah, the funny thing is I've met a number of people who surprising number of people know that because a little bit needs to more, it needs to Thanks, guys.
Is that all for the presentation you wanted me to look through? Or?
Well, it's too late now.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
I mean, it's like yellow.
My recommendation is don't worry about it too much at this point.
Hopefully, no flux it
On right here. If you mess up, you can always slow down, go back to it.
Yeah.
Just reiterate what you mean.
Yeah.
Everybody's gonna make a mistake when you talk. It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
I did this mistake forgetting to mention this when I gave my last talk last month. It happens. So I just stopped. Sorry, I should have explained this.
I should have made bullet points.
But I think the bullet points would have helped you a lot more when it comes to giving talks in general and mixing it up, right? So sometimes I'll throw random pictures in there just because I saw that in theirs too. Because that engages something, breaking up from the monotony of just seeing endless.
The one thing I wish that this was larger, so I could see like what's going on.
Oh, is that the image they gave you or something like that?
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Oh, I didn't realize they have notes.
Yeah. See, I can
Hey, Patrick.
Yeah.
So I don't think I was able to get the slides to synchronize. So I might have to just try to follow along with you.
Was this for the live stream or what?
Yeah, it's on right now.
Oh,
Live
really?
Right now, yeah.
Oh,
And
can they hear anything?
They can hear us, yeah.
Oh, really?
I'll flip over that's the house audio.
Yeah.
Which will come over here, but they can hear us through this right now.
Is it on right now?
Yeah, and I can hear you really, really well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So all this conversation I had?
Exactly.
Oh my god, that's awkward. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Alright, so good. Except for I can't get the slides.
Hey, how's it
I just
going?
wanted to say hi. I'm checking everybody in. How are you doing? Are you good to go?
Hopefully, yes. Definitely, maybe. How's the protest?
It was awful, but I got on BART, so I sidestepped the situation, but I got here in time, so that's good.
Cool.
It's like 6:15, so you got 15 minutes.
There's one thing that's happening, and that is the live stream. He has to manually click through the slides.
Ooh.
Yeah.
So are you not clicking through the slides then at all?
Well, I'm clicking through the slides here, but he has to follow along.
Okay, well, that seems like you could.
There's a problem though because I have like some janky animations, essentially.
Well, we'll do our best for the live stream. I think people here will have the best experience, but also for future meetups, I think we're probably going to probably have a different video. I'm sorry to hear. But it should be fine. Okay, I have to go home reach out. But I just want to say hi and good luck.
Yep. Should we just start now? I think 6:30.
So what is AngularClass?
Oh, AngularClass, well, I guess we're going to go over it, but it's basically Angular consulting, modern web development consulting and training.
Did you guys create this recently?
No, about a year. Less than a year ago, yeah.
I've seen you guys tweeted a bunch, and I didn't quite follow what it was. So there are a bunch of Udacity guys in there, aren't there?
What's up?
Aren't there a bunch of Udacity guys? Like Scott and...
Oh, Scott Moss, yeah.
Don't they do the same thing? Isn't that what Udacity does? And I'm just kind of confused. That's what I was like, you know.
No, I don't think Udacity is more of like. I mean, they're getting into like nano degrees, so like kind of like online training, I guess.
So you guys do more consulting type stuff? Or?
Yeah.
Training and consulting then?
What's up?
A little bit of training as well?
Yeah. Don't look at that. Hey, how's it going? More. Nice to meet you.
He works for Socializing too.
What's up?
He works for Socializing too.
Oh, nice. Are you gonna get into Angular 2?
What's up?
Are you interested in Angular 2?
Yeah, for sure.
It's good how to refactor stuff into Angular too. For some of our projects.
This is Mike's live. But yeah, I think we're about to start. Yeah.
Sure, after.
Yeah. We'll talk afterwards.
What's up? I hear these. I mean, I don't know if it's an April Fool's joke or what, but Angular 3.
Oh,
Is that just a spoof, or?
yeah, it's created and maintained by NG Donald Trump. He maintains Angular version of Angular 3.
You
Yeah.
gotta tell me what this is.
Oh yeah. Let's
You're
see
gonna love
here.
it. Donald Trump. Somehow
Yeah.
you worked in Donald Trump.
No, this is legit. This is like a real account.
That's even funnier.
Yeah.
Oh shit. I love stuff like this. Donald Trump. I can't believe this. It's just amazing. You know what? What's going on? We gotta figure out what's going on.
See, he's writing Angular 3 right here.
So
So he's currently the maintainer of Angular 3.
We have a new committer, folks, from New York. The Big Donald, the Big D.
Yeah. He even has a.
Was it? Hey, dude. I gotta.
Yeah.
Did you come up with this, or who came up with it?
No, I found this. It happened during Angular Connect. Someone just started tweeting Angular stuff.
Wait a minute. Does Donald know this?
I don't think so.
Probably not.
There's also
The real Ronald McDonald.
There's also like a JavaScript one. You know, there's like all kinds. Yeah.
I sense ripping off people's expressions here willy-nilly, not giving credit. You know.
Totally.
Don't
look at that one.
What did he say about? What I want to know, what is he saying about React? What's his reaction?
Oh, well, there's some interesting ones here.
Oh, fuck. This is hilarious. This is brilliant. Wait a minute, there's a line here.
Yeah, it's totally a thing.
Fuck. This is hilarious, man.
Yeah.
Developers don't have a sense of humor. You know, and it doesn't have to be gallows humor like I prefer. Excellent, man.
Yep.
Good luck.
Yeah, thanks.
It is.
Yes, right there. Yeah, so you're in it right now. Yeah. I think so. Do you hear me back there?
No. Your mic is not on.
Well, it's on, but for live stream.
Alright, the food's here, everybody. It's in the back, so if you guys want Thai food, it's Thai food.
We got Steven if there's like...
Just want everyone to know the food's here.
Yeah. So we're going to start 10 minutes late. UI Bootstrap. Although this is on. What were you saying?
Oh, it's live stream right now?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. I think I turned this off. What were you saying?
Oh, I was just saying
Yeah. Do we have anyone planned for the lightning talks?
not tonight.
Yeah. I volunteer that guy. He maintains. He maintains the UI Bootstrap. So. Yeah, sure. I'm just making it. But I could also like give a talk on Universal a little bit for a lightning talk. But I guess I'm speaking twice. Okay. That's true. That's what they usually do, right? He's gonna switch it.
next debate online, you should have him on the side going, Trump's, oh yeah, he's updating the whole, like...
Oh, him live tweeting? If anti-Trump was live tweeting? Yeah.
And it'd be like, yeah, you're totally, what's going on with you guys? They're calling it up, slamming the whole thing in parallel.
Yeah.
Live.
That would make sense. That would make sense for like whenever they do like a versus like talk. Yeah.
Think of the free publicity that you would get, because the Facebook guys aren't going to do that. Yeah. The Ember guys aren't going to do that. I'm just saying, in terms of sort of in your face kind of sort of thing.
Yeah.
You've got the chutzpah that nobody else would have. Just the fact that you can do that would be hysterical in front of people who would be exposed to that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. Now, I have a question for you. More serious. That's what you should know.
Okay.
With Angular 2, what are the trends or the future things or the things like, okay, you're sure you learn obviously the core and the fundamentals, but go this, that, and the other. Is there something of that sort? Because for example, on Facebook, React is like, learn Relay and GraphQL. There are detractors for that. They say it's whatever. But that's kind of like, you need to learn the core plus that. So with Angular, is there something, you know what I'm asking?
You just learn Angular.
Just learn Angular.
That's it. Like that's kind of like part of the reason for Angular 2 is that it's a suite of like frameworks or many tools or libraries. So like rather than React where you have to choose like React or like Redux or Flux or like Relay, and then you have to choose your CSS library.
It's a bit of an eclectic sort of.
Yeah, you have to choose like 20 different tools, and then the state of your application is different from the other person's.
Angular has to emphasize that point, number one.
Yeah, of course.
Number two, lots and lots of code samples.
Yeah. Well, this talk will have code samples, but it's directed more like conceptual understanding of like Angular 2 stuff. So it's not really like there's a few stuff that I skip over just because like that could be a whole talk, like forums or HTTP router itself. But
make it, if you make it as easy as possible for users to adopt, I mean, that's a no-brainer, obviously, but having someone who's sort of a buffer, that's actually a very time-consuming job. But if there was someone who did that kind of stuff as a, sort of a customer-facing kind of person, and handle those sort of things, to facilitate the transfer of knowledge from Angular to this method, that people appreciate.
Yeah, so that's really what this talk is kind of focusing on, is saying that, but like with the talk, like I'm also like reteaching some of the concepts of Angular 1, just because there's some like misconceptions.
What I'm getting is on an ongoing, regular basis to have sort of that point of contact person. I mean, you know, it has to be exactly what I do.
Yeah, you can contact me anywhere, like Twitter, Slack.
That's the goal. And make it more visible, because I don't think, I didn't know until you told me. So I'm guessing you're meeting people, a lot of people don't know this. So making a bigger splash, like, well, for those of you who find that a little too intense, you can talk to me. Sort of. I love this thing. This is brilliant.
Oh, yeah.
But what is he saying about it? Rails has done such a good job. He wants.
Well, I mean, that's technically true, because like there's only one.
That's the point. He's saying the shit. He's the persona under which you can say the stuff that you can't do otherwise. Oh man.
He is writing Angular 3.
I too. Look at that. Look. Oh man.
I mean, this was technically true right here.
Look at it, and then Mark.
All this, like,
never has there been such an effective parent. That's the point.
Yeah.
You know, piggybacking up this guy. What was that? Total loser? What? Virtual dog? All this stuff.
We are starting shortly.
I'm serious. I'm loving it, man. Because you know what? If you guys were to do it, it'd be like, people would be like, I'm shocked. You have to how could you? You have to justify it. It's strap off. Whatever. What do you expect?
There's another one, right? So some people are speculating that Brendan Ike is actually like maintaining this account.
Sorry?
Brendan Ike, who created JavaScript. Some people are speculating that he actually maintains this account. It's either him or White Cats.
Look at that. Despite it, the best.
That's every troll. JavaScript fatigue.
Did you say the F word?
Yeah.
I never associated it with parens before, but. Loving it.
It smells so wonderful and funny, of course, entertaining guy.
Did you see that? This is the JavaScript library I like to play with, nipple.js. The PC police.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right, I'm going to switch you over. Are you ready to go?
I guess so. Is it on?
Okay. Let me
play
see
with
here.
it a little bit.
Needs to go on. don't know. We'll see if it turns on. Okay, I'm gonna flip it over.
Yeah. Testing. 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 Testing.
It might have ran out of battery. Oh, I heard a click. Try it.
Testing. Testing.
Make it loud now.
Testing. Testing. Donald Trump? Yeah. Donald Trump? I think it's on. You're right, yeah. Testing. 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 Good? Nope. Louder? How about now? Yeah. How about now?
That's good. Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. It's pretty good. I might have to run over there and open it down.
Should I just start? All right. Can everyone settle down? Is it good?
I think it's pretty good.
Yep. All right. Is there someone doing announcements or?
No, just you.
Just me?
Yeah.
All right. Hello. Hey everyone. Thank you, Steven. The CTO of Dev over here. All right. Is everyone ready to learn a little bit of Angular 2? Has everyone got all your food? Okay. All right. So thanks for joining my talk today. This talk is called Angular 2 for AngularJS developers, assuming most of you are AngularJS developers. What we're going to do is we're going to conceptually introduce Angular 2 in terms of concepts that we already know in Angular 1. And we will also go over some of the concepts and misconceptions of Angular 1. And the thing about Angular 2 is that if anyone has tried it, we might have felt a little bit overwhelmed by the new syntax or the verbose way of writing applications. But I'm here to show you that conceptually they're pretty much the same in terms of Angular. And we're going to review some code examples, both Angular 1 and Angular 2, in order to demystify any sort of confusion the developers, as yourself might face. So I hope this guided understanding will help you have a better understanding of migration path or a better idea of what Angular 2 is. So let's get started. Oh, it's not changing now. Totally not working. Okay. All right, so if you don't know me already, speaker notes totally broken. So first, classic who am I? I'm Patrick Stapleton, also known as PatrickJS, also known as the guy with the blue box on Twitter. I am co-founder of AngularClass, which teaches like modern web development, training, consulting. If you're interested in that, we're also big fans of open source. You might have known us from the Angular 2 Webpack Starter for Angular 2, or our podcast Angular Air, which airs every Tuesday. I also work on Universal Angular 2, which is server-side rendering component for Angular 2. If you're interested, please contact me after this talk. You can find me pretty much anywhere on GDI2290, GitHub, Twitter. Cool. And this talk is provided by PubNub, which is a data stream network. Essentially, it's, if you ever try to build, yeah, it's a round of applause for PubNub. If anyone's ever like written any like real-time applications, you realize that you run into a lot of like scaling problems. So why even do that when you could just use PubNub? You know. All right, so let's go over some terminology. So whenever I talk about AngularJS, I'm really talking about Angular 1, 1x. When I say Angular, I really mean both frameworks. Whenever I say ES 2015, which I probably won't because it's kind of hard to speak, I also mean ES6, vice versa. Whenever I'm talking about TypeScript, that's really just ES6 plus types, and types are optional. And whenever I say a type, that's just a class, an instance of, per se. All right, so let's get started. Let's jump into a Hello World example. So first thing we do is we start off with our classic index.html, right? And for both applications, we're practically going to be using the same index.html. And if you notice that we're using the component syntax for both frameworks, and this is with the app selector, essentially. And we're also using a build system, in this case, Webpack, for both frameworks. And for Angular 2, there's a small caveat that we actually need some polyfills, and that's because Angular 2 is built on the assumption of ES6 plus. So we need to ensure that our environment is running up to those specs. Right? And if you're wondering, we start off with ES6 shims, and then we have the Angular 2 polyfill bundles. Inside of that, we have the ES6 promise, ensuring that we have promises. And then we have the reflect metadata. This is for decorators. We'll learn more about that later. And Zone.js, this is the magic that triggers the change detection, so we don't have to do digest loops anymore. All right, so this is our classic Hello World Angular 1 application that we all know. There's a slight difference here because we're using ES6 syntax, so we have a module system here. And this is the Angular 2 version, right? And conceptually, they're practically the same, and we're going to go over that right now. And the first thing you notice is the top part of your application, of our application file, and that is our specifying our inputs. So we need to import our framework API in order to interact with the framework, with our application. And the second thing you notice is our class, and that is essentially our application code. And this is our, whatever we write, our behavior will go here. And then on top of that, we have our metadata that we attach to that class. And this is to tell Angular's compiler that to change our behavior of that particular, of our component. And then lastly, we have bootstrap function, which essentially bootstraps our application in the document. For Angular 1, we have to manually specify the document. For Angular 2, it's kind of implied for the top level component. And we also specify our dependencies. So that's it. Talk's done. You guys waited all that long for pizza just for that, right? But it turns out it's not that easy, right? Like conceptually, that everyone could understand that, but it gets kind of overwhelming, you know, with just a ton of stuff in Angular 2. I'll let that sit for a little bit. So I'm here to say that Angular 2 is really just ES6, ES7 plus optional types, right? That's all it is. Most of the mental overhead of understanding Angular 2 is just that, right? So the first thing we have to go over, and that is the decorator. This is the first thing that trips up a lot of people just because it's this obscure, like, random @ syntax. And we can think of it simply as a function, right? In this case, a read-only function, which takes an argument, which is component, and attaches the variable property and set it to false. So what the @ is doing is it's actually invoking your function with the component, or in this case, the class, right? and then it's attaching the property false. So this is a little bit simpler compared to what Angular does. And what Angular does is it actually passes in a configuration object. And this is more of what we're used to seeing in Angular 2. And that allows us to, again, like configure our function before invoking it. So you can see we're just using JavaScript at this point. We have a function readConfig, which takes in the configuration object. And then we're doing the same like read-only function, but the implementation detail depends on the configuration. So this internally, this is exactly what Angular 2 essentially does under the hood with this compiler. All right, so going back to Angular 2, this is what we would see here, the outside component. And when it's compiled down from TypeScript, we essentially see it as this. And what it's doing is that it's invoking the component function with the app, and then it's attaching metadata. So whenever you see decorator, it's really just doing that under the hood, right? And the next thing we need to go over is state management. In modern web development, we're all just managing state at the end of the day, right? So what we're going to go over is how we interact with our component similarly to Angular 1. So Angular 1, we attach MyState property to our class, and we have access to it in the template. In Angular 2, it's the same thing, but we take advantage of more features in the language. Again, like Angular 2 is pushing as much of the framework into the language itself, so it doesn't have to reinvent the wheel. And in this case, it's taking advantage of default properties in TypeScript. And that's essentially saying you're able to say like this property equals this value, which is the default. And then we have access to that inside our template. And event handlers, we have that again in Angular 2. The differences here is that in Angular 1, we actually had a list of directives that were created from the framework itself. This ng-click was actually something created by the framework. And for every single event, they essentially have to do ng dash the event name. In Angular 2, we don't have like custom directives anymore. We have that kind of behavior built into the framework itself. So we could do the exact same thing with on dash the event name. And this could be any event. In this case, the native click event. Right? So the alternative syntax to that everyone else here knows is the parentheses, right? And you won't know until you actually start working with Angular 2 more, but it's actually kind of nice to have these parentheses in order for us to quickly realize like what in our template are events and whatnot. So that's actually one of the benefits of the new syntax. And another way to think about this is how the native browser works. So the native browser, if you don't know, actually has an attribute called onClick, which allows us to invoke a function in the global scope. Now, the other thing you may or may not know is that whenever you have an ID on element, you actually have a reference to that in the global scope. So in this case, we have an ID myButton, which is referenced in the global scope. So you can actually try this and say window.myButton and have access to the elements. So all of your IDs actually are put in the global scope. And this is similar to how the native browser works. Again, like Angular is really just providing you a lot of functionality that the browser has, but allowing you to have a lot more control over it. So the next thing we have to go over is the digest loop, right? Like in Angular 1, we had this notion of the digest loop that may have caused a ton of confusion because there's just a ton of like magic going on, and no one really knew like when we should run the digest loop, or like how it should be invoked, or why do we use always $apply all the time. But it turns out like we run the digest loop whenever we want to reflect changes on our view, right? So in this example, you can see here that whenever we do ng-click, internally it's running the $digest. But if we have an asynchronous, if something running asynchronously in that callback, then we have to manually specify, we had to manually tell Angular to run this digest loop. Now, a lot of people would see this and say, root scope.digest, what are you doing? What about $apply? Well, it turns out $apply does the exact same thing on the root scope. So what I'm doing here is I'm just kind of showing that this is essentially what's going on, is that after we change values on a model, we essentially need to tell our view to update, right? Now, let me see here, click get data, and it invokes our get data function, which in turn runs just asynchronous value, which then at the end of it invokes this $digest. And one thing to know is that whenever I'm teaching Angular, a lot of people would get confused of when the digest loop is going to be run because of this it's just hidden away from you. So the changes aren't actually reflected until the digest loop is running. So in this line here, where we see this.text equals something, the digest loop isn't running there. It doesn't actually, your changes doesn't actually get reflected. So you could change the model many times over before you reflect it. All right, so what about Angular 2? We have this thing called Zone.js. We have like a ton of magic from it. It magically, someone told us that we don't have to do $apply anymore, right? So it turns out that whenever we do the click, this is the exact same thing. We invoke a function on our scope, get data, which also invokes the asynchronous function, or can invoke. I forgot that. But then it turns out Zone.js is telling Angular and keeping track of all the asynchronous actions that's happening within our application. So Angular itself, Angular 2, is actually interacting with Zone.js in order to keep track of all this asynchronous calls. So we don't need to call $digest anymore. In fact, like $digest doesn't run many times over. It only runs once when the view is changed. So this is an optimization that we don't even have to worry about anymore. And a quick overview is that with Angular 1, with ng-click, you have $digest that gets run at the end of your function. And in order to update your view, you have to trigger it again at the end of whenever you change your models. For Angular 2, the same thing applies, but it's removed from you, so you don't have to worry about that anymore. All right, the next thing we go over is dependency injection. So you may or may not know how dependency injection works, but essentially the simplest way to think of it is a huge hash map. And we can think of it as just an object. We call it DI. And we could create our service as we normally do, my service. And the other thing about DI is that we specify a token, in this case, a string value, which is my service. And it's going to associate itself with our class up here. So what we're doing is we're creating an instance of our service, and we're setting it to our hash, and with the token, which is my string. Then when we're trying to get the tokens out of our controller here, and you can actually see that it's popping the function out, and then it's an array with just the tokens, in this case, the one string value. And you can see here that the tokens equals after my app. And we're iterating through the tokens and returning the instance of that. And then whenever we invoke our controller, we essentially have we have access to that service for us. All right. So what about Angular 2? Well, again, for Angular 2, we're pushing a lot of things into the language itself as opposed to recreating a lot of things. So with Angular 2, we're using map, which is a new construct in ES6, which allows us to use any key as opposed to a string. Now, one of the limitations of an object literal in the previous example is that the key has to be a string, but in ES6 plus, that could be a reference to a class or anything, any sort of type. So you can see in this example, we create a new map instance. Then we create a token, in this case, the class itself as a token. And we create an instance of that. Then we set the token, the key value, the key and the value. So whenever we do a get on our map, we get the instance. of that. So it's a lot simpler than what's going on over there, but essentially, again, this is Angular pushing more stuff into the language. Right. And this is an overview of the ES5 version of writing a component. And that is essentially the same thing, where we specify our component, we specify our class, and then we had to manually specify the tokens in our constructor. And in this case, rather than a string, we use the reference SQL type. Okay, ignore that. But all right, now the next thing we go over is services. So in Angular 2 and Angular 1, the services can be practically the same. And that is if we're using the same class syntax. In Angular 1, if we use the .service syntax, it invokes new on our class. So we can see here that conceptually there's something different other than the way we provide these services to the framework. So in Angular 1, we do the angular.module. We call it providers, and then we attach our service here. In Angular 2, all we do is we just create an array. And we just maintain a reference of all of our services inside of that. And we pass the array around, as opposed to creating this new construct, which is angular.module. Now, going over again, the way that we provide that to our components is with that collection. So normally the convention is all caps providers, or the thing underscore providers. So you might see that a lot. In our component, what we're doing is we're specifying all of our dependencies within it. So again, like this is going back to Angular just using a lot of the constructs provided by ES6. Rather than creating angular.module and then passing that around, with Angular 2, we're attaching everything, all of its dependencies to the component itself. So you can think of a component as a miniature Angular app that has all of its dependencies specified there. So when we provide the collection providers in this component, we have access to this class. And we're going to inject it here. But there's something that we need to take notice here, and that is the public service. So this is a TypeScript syntax, and this is one of the reasons why Angular 2 is better suited for TypeScript, because we can take advantage of some of this syntactic sugar. So what's going on is that Angular 2, or TypeScript, is essentially setting the type, the property type service, to the instance of service, setting the arguments type service to instance service, and then also setting service to service. So rather than all that boilerplate, you could just use one of the helpers. And what's getting compiled from Angular 2 is essentially this. So we can see the decorators be compiled down to reflect. Now, if you ever looked in the source code, you'll see this. It gets kind of crazy. So let's just recreate this in ES6. So it makes a lot more sense to us. So the first thing we notice is we have our decorator here. And this is what we did previously. It's just a function, right? And we also have a way of annotating our parameters. So we specify that for our parameters, we have this bracket service. And this is very much similar, or almost exactly, as ng annotate that you might be familiar with, except for in TypeScript it's built in. So we don't need to download something else. We just put a flag in TypeScript and say, like, annotate all of our stuff for us. And then here at the bottom, essentially what we're doing is we're, again, like decorating over our class, attaching all that metadata. All right. So now the next thing we go over is component composition. With Angular 1, it was pretty simple with components, the .component syntax. Essentially, we have our navbar, and we could just put it inside it like that. And Angular 2 is the same thing. We could compose components the same way. If anything, it's more simple. And you'll notice that we have the same implementation of navbar, the same implementation of home. The difference is, again, like how we kind of manage that, how we pass around the collection. So like in our component for home in Angular 2, we have to specify what's inside the template. So the other thing about Angular is that it's a compiler. So line by line, what it's doing is it's looking for anything that it knows and then creating something out of it. So the browser goes in, line for line. It says, I know what HTTP, or I know what link element is. I know what the div is and everything, and then it's going to create its own classes for that. But Angular is going to go in again, and then it's going to ignore all the browser stuff, and it's going to create its own version of those. But it only knows what you tell it. In this case, it doesn't know that there's a navbar unless you tell it that there is. So that's why we have that there. So the other thing is scope. One of the cool things about JavaScript is this way of delegation. So I'm going to explain that. If you ever try this inside the console to string, you'll actually get window.object. And that might be surprising. You're like, I didn't know that was a function. But it's really being run on the window object. All right, so the scope is just the window. And whenever you do toString, it's doing toString of the window. So in Angular 1, we do the same thing with scopes. A scope is really just a function, right? So we create a function here, in this case scope. We create an instance of that. Then we do toString. Of course, it's the famous object, but we know it's this object. But we could actually change that, right? So we could overwrite this scope, right? So this is similar to like a method or something that we're used to. But then whenever we do new scope on that and do toString, we get something else, right? Because it's within that scope as opposed to the other ones. All right, so how does this work in Angular 1? Well, we use controllers to maintain different scopes. So similar to how the native browser worked with onClick previously, where it invoked everything globally, with Angular, we want to be able to scope different things and say, this part of the template has access to this object, this part, this object. So in Angular 1, we did this with AngularController, and we specify different controllers, in this case, the top controller, middle controller, bottom, but we ran into a problem. The problem is not realizing what property lives on what scope, right? Like this is, like I don't even know what's going on here, right? So we solved that, right? We solved it with controller as syntax. We do as VM, we do VM everywhere, right? And we found out that we ran into the exact same problem. We didn't solve anything at all, actually. We still don't know what's going on. And that's because we actually didn't name our controllers correctly. We were supposed to say, well, this is the controller as syntax, essentially like top.prop, middle.prop, bottom.prop. Assume that there's a controller as syntax here as a typo. But with that, we're able to mix our scopes and we're able to tell for a fact like what is referencing what. And that is one of the reasons why we switched to this controller as syntax, because we had so many scopes nested within each other. Right? So one way to help against this is to not use AngularController at all. In Angular 1, we did this with the doc component syntax. Essentially, we're creating isolated scopes outside of everything else because we don't want your scope to mess with my scope, right? So we create our own scope. In this case, we have a component of top, and of course it's called top, so it has a property of top. And then let's say we have another component called bottom, and it has bindings of top. You can see here that we're binding the top controller to it, and we're passing it down to our child. And in the template, we're concatenating both the properties here. And that's kind of how we pass data around these isolated scopes. And we do this for encapsulating logic in order for us to better reason about like what's going on, rather than dealing with a ton of like edgy controller everywhere and kind of figure out what's going on. We kind of isolate our views. So in Angular 2, we do the exact same thing, but it's a lot simpler. There's everything's kind of more implied, like controller has syntax. So again, we have the default properties here, prop equals top, and we have access to it in the template. And we have another one called bottom, and that also has a property called bottom that also has access to in the template. And the other thing to note is that there's no conflict here of this is called prop and this one's also called prop, because they're isolated. So another way of passing data down, this is similar to what we did with Angular 1, and that is with the bind dash syntax. So again, we have the prop equals top, and then we say bind to the top value and pass in the prop. And in our bottom component, what we're doing is we're specifying inputs, which is similar to bindings in Angular 1, where we specify what we want to bind to. In this case, what data we want to get out of from our parents. So we're specifying the top property. We're setting a default here, but it's going to get overwritten by our parents. And in our template, we're concatenating both of them. So this would be bottom plus top. Right. And another syntax for this is bracket notation. So in JavaScript, we could think of it as creating a new instance of top component here as top, creating a new instance of bottom component as bottom. And then we do bottom bracket top equals top dot prop, right? So that's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. So in Angular 2, we do the same thing. We do top equals prop, right? It's just a shorter way of us specifying the property value should equal this, right? And we do the same thing in we specify our inputs here. And let's see. Now there's an alternative syntax to this as well, and that is using the decorator. You might have seen this more often. And that is with the inputs specify as metadata, but rather than that, we specify a decorator of at input for each of the properties that we want to specify as an input. And what's going on is that the decorator is actually attaching the inputs metadata to this class. So you don't have to write this on the left. You just have to write what's on the right. It's a little bit nicer. All right, so now we're going to go over the differences between data binding. So in Angular 1, we had two-way data binding. Everything was bound to everything, right? We do $watch on everything. In Angular 2, we heard that this was taken away from us. We heard that everything is one way or the highway, right? It's only one direction. So I'm going to explain like the different ways of how we could utilize one-way direction or unidirectional data flow, and compare the differences between Angular 2 data binding. So with Angular 1, again, this is the example of the top. So we have property here, our top property, and then we pass it to our child. And whenever we want to change data, we do an ng-click, change data, but then we set the top property to something else, right? And then the changes are reflected at the top here. We don't have to do anything. This is Angular 1. Everything just kind of like propagates everywhere, right? Now, with Angular 2, we could do the same thing, right? We have a top and a property here, which the property lives in the top. And we have a bottom component here, which also has a top property that we insert from the top, right? Remember, this is the default data that gets overwritten. And whenever you do a click on change data, we're going to change this top to something new. But this property actually only lives in this component. So the change is only reflected in this component, right? So that's kind of like a problem, right? So what's really going on is that the unidirectional data flow for Angular 2 is kind of like a synchronous running of top to down. And it's a lot easier to reason about because it's what we're thinking about is this changed, and this changed, and this changed. So it's really just a snapshot of our views. So whenever we change something up top, it should always go top to down, right? And we do this for optimization reasons, and that's because at the top component, we can check all of our children to see if this child's changed. If this child's property hasn't changed, then don't render it, and then go to the next one. If this child hasn't changed, then don't render it, go next one. And that's for optimization reasons, so we don't have like a ton of like digest loops going everywhere. That's to make it a lot more predictable. All right, so let's see here. So to trigger change detection correctly with this approach, we could specify on the bottom a click listener. So we could register a listener click on the top component that changes the property at the top, right? And at the bottom, when we click this button, it's actually firing the native click event and propagating up. And this is how we are able to reflect changes at the top that propagate down to our children. So this is nice, but we deal with Angular with services, and we maintain states in services. We don't usually have state inside of our views this way, or we don't usually manage it this way. So I'm going to show or walk you through how we do that with services. So making a very, very simple service here in Angular 2, a class, and this is our state, which is _data, which is just an object. We have another function called onUpdate, which takes a callback, and we save that for later. And then we have this other function called update that takes a value. And what this is doing is essentially overriding the state inside of the service itself. Then it's calling update on the callback that we registered. Now inside of our top component, we're essentially registering your listener on update with our callback. So remember in the previous one, on update, callback, and then we invoke it later. So whenever there's an update, in this case on the second line, it's going to propagate up here, and it's going to say this subprop equals data. All right. Now on our bottom component, whenever we click, we're invoking update. Now this is invoking our update function, which in turn does this .service.update with the new value. And then up here at the top, because we're injecting that service, it's automatically updating the new property, right? And this is how you achieve the unidirectional data flow that people keep talking about. And essentially, this is Flux, almost. Like one more thing, we'll get into that. So how do we refactor this to use more Flux-like patterns, if you might have heard that? And we take advantage of that with event emitters. Now, we're going to refactor a service by removing pretty much everything. Now this service is essentially now just a store where we get the latest data, and we update the data. That's pretty much all it's doing. And at our top level component, we're doing the same thing where we're saying on update, we're going to change the data. And down here, what it's doing is it's updating the service. Again, the service is just a store at this point. Then updating the component inside of it, the top level component's state. Now, the bottom component, in order to trigger that change, we create an event emitter. And this essentially is emitting new values whenever there's state change. In this case, whenever we do click, we're saying update with the next value. In this case, something new. So the event emitter in Angular 2, we could think of it as almost like a node event emitter, but with one event. And it's like a string of data. So the next thing we go over is forms. So I'm only going to go over ng model. That's because a lot of people were asking about it. So in Angular 1, we have the typical ng model here that we're all like love and used to. In Angular 2, we have something similar, and that is this bracket parentheses ng model, which does the exact same thing of updating the local state, which is in the component, as well as the view state, which is the elements value. And again, we specify what's inside of our template with foreign directives. And again, this is just a collection. So remember, foreign directives is really just an array of many like helpers. So internally, there's a ton of these directives to help you with your forms. And again, we specify it here in their directives array. So what's really going on under the hood with this bracket notation here is that it's doing a bind to this event. And another way to think of it is this bracket notation text. So you're setting the property of input to the value of text, in this case empty string. And then on the input event from this element, you're setting the text to the value of that. So again, the text is going down into the component, it's setting that. But then on input, whenever someone types, it's setting the text in our component here to that value. So again, like we're pushing data into our view element here, and we're getting data out. And this is essentially the two-way data binding that we all know and used to. So we achieve something similar with ng model, which does both of that. And you can actually deconstruct this for you. So now, we have this other thing in Angular called structural or dynamic elements, and that's like with ng repeat, ngif, and whatnot. So we have nearly the same thing. In Angular 2, we have this star ng4 with star ng4, items of items. It's similar to item of sidebar items. And we have this weird thing called this asterisk here. So let's go over that. So what's happening is that this asterisk is to signify that this is a structural directive. And what it's doing is that it's doing a ton of optimizations under the hood. In this case, it's creating a template element. And if you don't know, a template element essentially allows you to write any HTML inside of it, and it won't reflect that to the view, but it'll essentiate those elements. And Angular takes advantage of this as an optimization step in order for you to repeat the elements in an optimized way. And what's happening is that it's actually faster to clone from a template than it is to recreate elements. So that's essentially what it's doing here, is that it's cloning this element for every time it's being repeated. So when you do ng4, what it's really doing is, and you can write it in this syntax if you wanted to, is adding the property ng4 to a template. And then whenever you do hash item, you're really getting a reference to that element itself. And then when you do like for of items, what it's really doing is binding the items to the property ng4 up. Again, because this is a directive, all the implementation details hidden within the attribute ng4. All right, now the next thing we could go over that Angular doesn't have, and that is styles. In Angular 1, there's no way to manage styles. They just didn't think about it at the time, just because it was built like 6 years ago. In Angular 2, we have this notion of scoped styles, and that's essentially saying that we are able to scope the styles to our particular component. So in this example, the .main is styling this class here within this component, and it's only going to be reflected here. So if you have a main class anywhere else in the application, it will not have this style because it's scoped to this particular component. Now, this is extremely powerful because it's built into the framework, but it allows us to, it turns out CSS is actually kind of good in a smaller scope. So this is something that Angular 1 doesn't have, but Angular 2 does. It's pretty nice. All right, so that's pretty much an overview of Angular 2. It turns out like nothing's really changed. Conceptually, everything's kind of the same. Angular 1 was released like 6+ years ago. We didn't know any of the best practices then. We had directives for forever, and a component's really just a directive at the end of the day. It's just more of best practices combined. And what Angular 2 does is it simplifies our workflow for a lot of these patterns that we've been noticing in Angular 1 that should be more into the framework. So Angular 2 provides us essentially with twice the functionality with essentially half the code. You can see that's a lot simpler because Angular pushes a lot of that into the language itself. And that's because it has better core concepts rather than Angular 1, where during its implementation, like when Michiko was creating it, essentially like someone was asking for this feature, then he added it. Like directives was added like a little bit later. So like a lot of this stuff was built from the ground up with better separation in mind, more of it into the language. So it also allows us to do a lot more advanced patterns with a lot less code. We didn't cover any of the advanced patterns, but essentially, yeah. And because it's adopting TypeScript, we're able to take advantage of a lot of TypeScript features, including like typos. There's like a ton of bugs where I just had a typo, and that was ES5 land. With TypeScript, that's not a problem anymore because the editor will definitely say like, this is a problem. Or if your teammate has or wrote the function name in a different style, like snake case or something, or underscore case or camel case or whatever, you're able to see in the autocomplete that what he was trying to type. So there's a lot of like awesome TypeScript things there. And that's pretty much Angular 2. So if you feel like learning more about AngularClass, we do a ton of open source. We also do training consulting. You can follow us on AngularClass. And yeah, that's pretty much our talk. Yeah. I think we also have a Q&A. Yep.
Instead of using an ES6 shim and polyfill, do you use Babel?
So rather than using an ES6 shim or polyfill, would you rather use Babel? So Babel, I think, can provide polyfills for this on the fly. Essentially, you would buy into features if you use them. So yeah, technically you can't use Babel. You don't have to use TypeScript at all. In fact, there's also some Babel plugins to allow you to take advantage of the DI injection for the constructor. So you don't have to, again, you don't have to buy the TypeScript, but yeah, you can do that. Yep.
Can you tell us a little bit about the status of IE and Angular 2? And,
the status of?
Internationalization.
Oh, I can't speak for that because the Angular team is working on that, so I can't say. I think they're still need to work on it. Yeah. There was another question?
Yeah, they were talking about backporting that same thing to 1.5.
Yeah, I can't speak for any of that. Sorry. Question, yeah.
How are you handling routing?
Routing, so I didn't cover that, but with Angular 2 we have a component router, essentially attaching routes to the component. Again, this is going over to the same like Angular 2 mantra of everything attached to the component. Again, I didn't cover that in that talk, but you would use the component router. Yep. Oh yeah, so that's another thing I didn't cover. Performance compared to Angular 1. So Angular 2 performance is probably like 10 times or X amount times faster, just because it's doing a ton of optimizations. Like we went over that with the template element as one optimization, the change detection, which is another optimization, which is like a ton, most of the optimization, which is the change detection. So performance-wise, it's just a lot better. Yeah.
So we talked about this scope styling thing.
Yep. Oh, the style scope. Yep.
Yeah. So is there a way that we can propagate that style? Suppose if I have a wrapper component, right, and I want this style to propagate to components within that wrapper. Is there a way, or this style will always be specific to this component?
So this style will always be scoped to this particular component. What you're asking is essentially, can I share this style to any child components? There's a few different ways we could do this. We could just handle this in JavaScript. Essentially, we would just use a dependency injection itself, and we would just inject like a style and then just kind of like, push that down. Another way of handling this is with just JavaScript itself. We could just pass it like this is just a string, but we could just use the module system itself and then pass that around. But again, that would still be scoped to those particular elements. Yep. Is there any built-in support for CSS preprocessors? So technically, because Angular 2 is more of a compiler, you could technically create your own CSS compiler because you're implementing one. But like essentially, there's no built-in support because it's out of the scope of the framework. But again, that's something that the build tool or your build system will just take advantage of. And then it will compile down like something like Sass that you would use inside of here. And the other caveat about these encapsulated styles is that Angular 2 has a virtual shadow DOM. So essentially, like any like shadow DOM like DSL for CSS will work here, but internally it's emulating the shadow DOM. So use Webpack. Yeah. Question?
All right. We've got a few questions from the live stream. First from Quentin Brown. How can you override the styles? If you have a .main class in the page shell, will you override the component? Question mark.
So the question is, my CSS foo is not that good. So the question is, if you have a global style, I'm assuming, can you if you manage styles globally in the script tags or something at the index level, can you override styles at the component level if they're scoped this way? I think the answer is yes, just because it's not, like you don't have to do any hacky like .import or anything because the specificity of this is not that much. But I can't answer more than that. Does anyone have a curveball question I can answer? Like Flux, Redux, any other questions? Give me a hard one.
All right, we have another one.
Yeah.
We have more. Same guy. Quentin, is the Angular team going to adopt the Flux Redux patterns in GRX?
Awesome. So you could say that Flux is built in. I try to go over that, but essentially Flux is a higher abstraction for, so like the thing about abstraction is that like when you're working with the team environment, you increase the abstraction level depending on how many people are on the team. So something like Flux is just a really high abstraction for a team like Facebook where there's like 20 or something like people working on this project. But you could simply express like the Flux like paradigm with what I went over, and that's essentially just saying like an event emitter, just a service that triggers a change over here on the side that reflects it at the top. That's pretty much it. And if you do that, that's essentially Flux. And then if you change the abstraction, you could just increase the abstraction level to be more idiomatic to Flux, but essentially same concepts. So the question is, will they implement something like that? It's built in. So Flux is built in. Redux essentially is a synchronous way of managing your state. So technically that's built into with RxJS because rather than synchronously reducing your state up the tree, you could do that with streams and then just do a reduce with that. Hopefully that answers your question. Okay.
One last one, if you're up for it.
Yep.
Got, if you're new to learning AngularJS 2, should you learn it with Webpack? Which module loader is the Angular team going to recommend? JSPM? Question mark.
So I advocate Webpack just because like there's a huge community out there for Webpack, and I'd rather just like have everyone follow the same thing. The question is, when starting Angular 2, should you pick System.js or Webpack? Honestly, System.js is simpler, but in terms of like making a production application, there's like 5 or 20 more steps you have to go with System.js because you actually have to build it and minify it and everything. So starting out System.js, sure, or Webpack if you feel like diving deep or something. You had a question?
I was just kind of curious as to how
other applications, or I should say, other components are adjusting to something like Bootstrap, datetime picker, drag and drop, that kind of thing. So we have one person in the audience here who maintains the UI Bootstrap library who could speak about that. I think he has a lightning talk soon too, but I think, well, if I'm speaking for them, which totally doesn't make sense for me to speak for them, but I would say that it's better. No, I think it's just because Angular 2 provides you with a ton of stuff, including scope CSS, that a lot of these like UI widgets don't provide. What you really end up doing is deconstructing like that implementation into something that's more idiomatic to Angular 2. So for example, like Bootstrap has a huge CSS file, but a lot of that should be encapsulated inside of the components. And there's a ton of benefits for doing that and making a more idiomatic way for Angular 2, because what the Angular team is working on is essentially like a lot of dead code elimination and tree shaking. And as essentially you buy into what you use. So if you had an idiomatic version of Bootstrap and you don't use a widget or don't use this class, that can actually be removed at build time. So it's really just deconstructing those widgets that were created in the earlier generations to what web applications should be built with. So I would say that there might be some struggling work there just because you have to deconstruct it. But again, I shouldn't be speaking for anyone who's doing those integrations out. Is there any more questions? Any like crazy questions, hardballs, comparisons? What about Aurelio? No, none of that? Nope. Is that it? I think we're good. Question? Yeah.
So I know you do in ES6 you're doing import statements.
Yep.
And it points to the path of each file. So for JS, I'm just minifying everything into a single file.
Yep.
How does this work when you're doing the paths?
So the question is, with the ES syntax, we have import statements in all of our files. And with Angular 2, how does it work in the browser, right? That's the question?
More for production.
For production minification reasons. Like, how would you do that? You would do it with a bundling system, and that essentially would take the entry point, which is usually the top component or the bootstrap function that imports everything else, and it will crawl essentially your file dependencies and bundle it as one. And then it would just minify. And then that's essentially how it would also do tree shaking, is that it would bundle it all to the same space, and then if you're not using this function, then it's going to remove it. So, yeah, it's very, very good. Yep, announcements, yeah. Yep, so we have announcements, then more QA if you guys want to.
Gotta speak up.
All right, so we're queuing up front here for some special announcements.
MigrateJS is building knowledge delivery app to help you find the best learning resources faster than any other website. So it's already becoming one of the largest websites for finding tutorials and articles for JavaScript, AngularJS. So check out Migrate on Apple Store or also migrate.com website. And if you're interested in exciting side project based on AngularJS, at the moment it's 1.3 version, so if you're interested in changing to 2.0, we can talk about this. Thank you.
Anyone else wants to make announcements?
So I help develop the UI Bootstrap project, and I just wanted to mention that we released 1.1 just this morning. So if anybody's using the library, just give me a heads up.
Ionic? No announcements? Anyone else?
Got one more internet question if you want to do it.
I guess so. Yeah.
Okay. He says this is a tricky one. If we're ready. We ready?
Yeah.
All right. What's the status of server-side rendering Angular Universal?
Can you read it again? I was left. Sorry. Can you read it again?
Oh, read it one more time.
Yeah.
Reading it one more time. What is the status of server-side rendering Angular Universal? Question mark.
Yeah. So I maintain Angular Universal with Jeff Wepley. The status is that it's on beta 0 just because I've been lazy to update it on beta 1. That's just because the only change there, which is the compiler. But at the moment, you could, if you guys want to do server-side rendering in Angular 2, which I think is one of the best features of Angular 2, you're able to do that now. In fact, you're able to use it in production just because it's being rendered on the server and it won't touch your client, right? So that's one of the benefits of it. The other benefit is that you can't do it in Angular 1. Well, you kind of can, but there's like a ton of wrappers. So the status of Angular 2 Universal is that if you guys want to help out on that, definitely contact me. Wesley Cho here is contacting me. So if anyone's interested in server-side rendering, please contact me out. Any other questions? Anything Angular 2 related? Anything at all? Web development? Yeah.
Have you tried to browserify?
Browserify. Yeah. So presumably it's all the same. It's all just bundling. You can use Browserify. Browserify is a lot simpler just because it's just one thing. It just bundles and that's it. Yeah, you can do that.
Have you tried using material design with Angular 2? What's the best way of?
The question was material design with Angular 2. So I tried Material Light and other Material one. Material Light, I had problems with it just because it was the framework's problem. It turns out like a lot of CSS is coupled to the markup with these like widget libraries, so that's kind of a problem. I think there was another material project out there that had problems with, but there's also the Angular material project that they're working on, and that will be what pretty much everyone will be using.
Does it work with Angular 2?
Oh yeah, so there's the Angular 1 material, which is actually great, maintained by the Angular team as well. There's the Angular 2 material, which they're working on still, but yeah, it's not out yet to use, yeah.
So in your experience, what's the best way
to use like material design with Angular 2? I don't know, at the moment, just wait. Just because like the other material, like CSS frameworks are actually really bad, so yeah. Any other questions or got it? Oh, too much? Yeah. Polymer material? Okay.
So that's it. One big announcement though.
Do you need this? Okay.
Talk to his face.
Materials
Yeah.
Alright. So we have a sign-up sheet if you're interested in speaking or hosting. Please go fill that out. It's on Google Forms. If you go to my Twitter, which is MOREWRY, it's one of the last tweets, so you can find the link. Feel free to sign up if you're interested in doing a talk or lightning talk, or if your company is interested in hosting.
Can you post
I
it
assume
on
that the material is going to be up on
It actually is linked from the Meetup. It's in like the about us description. I forgot about that.
Well, give Patrick another round of applause. Okay, so now we're going to go into lightning talks. We're running a little bit late, so we probably only have time for one lightning talk. Does anyone have anything they want to present? I think somebody came up to me. Who was it? Okay, or announcements.
We did announcements.
Okay. Well, in that case, all right, if there's no lightning talks, then thanks for coming.
They're making your prizes. Well,
whatever you want.